Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. Next comment or question comes from VJR-8080. And this was in response to video 2, how to restore the Roland D-70 SYSEX factory restore, video I did in April 2021. And VJ writes, I was not able to do it with a computer. I had to send the data from another D-70 I had, and it did it in 2 seconds, literally. The receiver said receiving. I was not able to make it work with the computer. It sent me an error message, data overflow or something. I'll tell you what, SYSEX with these old synthesizers can drive you balmy. But several things spring to mind, or two in particular, should I say. As the data overflow message means either the memory is full or you're trying to write to the memory too quickly. That tends to be the two conditions that give you a data overflow memory error. So first is, did you wipe the memory before you started? In general terms, you have to do that on the D-70. It's the only synthesizer I know that you have to actually wipe the memory, or I can think of, you have to wipe the memory before you try to load in a new set of SYSEX parameters. And the other thing is, have you tried slowing the baud rate down on how quickly your computer is sending the data down the wire? Remember, these old synthesizers were built on a chipset that wasn't particularly fast. You know, with the modern computers that can, shove data around at gigabits per second, these things worked at, sometimes bits per second. Yeah, quite a big difference in speed. So you have to throttle the data transfer right down on a lot of this old stuff. Anyway, I get a reply from VJ and he says, yes and yes, I have another D-70. When connecting both, I was able to transfer the data in less than a second. Well, in that case, if you slowed the transfer right the way down and you've erased the memory on the target machine, which is the D-70, the next thing I probably would be looking at this point in time is the MIDI interface. Now, I have said on many occasions I use a very, very simple MIDI interface. I don't use a particularly sophisticated interface. It's just literally a MIDI Sport 2.2. And the reason why I use the MIDI Sport 2.2 is because there is not a lot. You can't program it. It's not programmable. It literally is send it to channel 1, send it to channel 2, and that's all it does. But it really does work with every single synthesizer. I have tried it with more complicated interfaces and found it to be more of a hit and miss when trying to do SYSEX. Whereas whenever I do SYSEX using the MIDI Sport, works every time, first time. So that's just my experience. So hopefully that gives you a pointer on what might be going wrong here. Next question comes from DD or DGSS1GZ. Some of these names are getting stranger and stranger. And this was in response to the System-8 could be a JP-8080, a video that was done in April 2022. And DG writes, the 8080 is better than a System-8, at least for now, and at least for Super Saw. They could upgrade the System-8 to have those extra features that the JP-8080 has. Yes, you get close, but not that close. You really need those special features. I'd love to see it happen again. I also want the Alsys to make the Andromeda again. That's another synth that's just nuts. I agree with you, the Andromeda is a synth that's nuts. and if memory serves me correctly, the Andromeda is actually in Kibu's touring rig. The Andromeda is 16 channel multi-timbal, and you can imagine what you can do with some more serious sequencing gear. That's equal to or greater than 4x what the Moog Mog 1 can do. It may only be 3x, can't remember. One can argue that 3x MT is all that reasonable fits on a keyboard, but with MIDI I suppose you can get creative with up to 16 zones, all this in an analog synth. Well, we really need to see what happens next with the System-8 from Roland. They surprised everybody with the Jupiter 4 release fairly recently, and whether we actually have any further releases for the System-8 will be interesting. I know that I was talking to a Roland tech some time ago about the System-8, and they kind of ran out of steam with the System-8. The System-8, the platform on the System-8, the way the synthesis or the tone generation is done on the System-8 is completely different to the way that tone generation is done on the Zen Core engine. And the System-8 requires a lot more processing power, and therefore is actually under-spec'd for what it does. So that's an unfortunate piece. But, you know, Roland have managed to cram a Jupiter 4 into it fairly recently. Now, in terms of the Andromeda, I can't really see this being made by Elsys, and I think that one of the reasons why I can't see it being remade by Elsys or whatever you want to call them is because they are owned by MX Music, and MX Music is not interested in remaking legacy product, as far as I can tell. And there's something else coming up on the channel probably before you see this mailbag about MX Music. Now, I could see this being a target for a Behringer polysynth project. There are a number of synths that have started in the pipeline. One of these, once these are cleared through, possibility they start looking at other candidates to come through now they've got their ARM technology kind of nailed. And I know that the Finnish musician, I said that earlier on, is using that in his touring rig. If you look at the recent video, which is Stranger Things Star Wars, you see him using the Andromeda in that particular video. So there you go.